The rope was already snug against his throat when she spoke. The sky above was too bright, too blue for a man about to die. And yet the town had gathered, as if the color itself promised a spectacle. Before the lever could fall, a woman's voice cut through the heat like distant thunder splitting stone. "I'll pay his debt." Even Crow knelt on the rough planks, splinters biting through worn denim, wrists bound behind him with rope that smelled of old blood and fresh fear. The noose grazed his neck with every breath, a quiet reminder of the 6 long weeks this town had waited to see him drop. The crowd pressed in tight, boots grinding dust into the boards of the gallows square, faces bright with that uneasy mixture of excitement and revulsion that comes when death is scheduled like a market day. Judge Colin Bren stood apart, black coat immaculate despite the powdery grit that coated everything else in cold water. "Montana Territory." His voice carried easily, smooth and certain, the tone of a man who had never doubted his authority for a single moment. "Even Crow," he began, unfolding a sheet he did not need to read, because every soul present knew the charges by heart. "You stand accused of the murder of Samuel Hartwick, landowner and esteemed member of this community. In light of the compelling testimony and the risk of flight, this tribunal finds the evidence sufficient. The sentence is death by hanging." Even's jaw tightened, dark eyes moving across the crowd, not searching for mercy, but for the faces he knew had lied. He found them quickly, men in clean hats, boots untouched by honest work, smiles that never rose above their teeth. Hartwick owned half the grazing land south of town and wanted the rest. Even had refused to sell his narrow mountain parcel, 20 acres of pine and Cold Creek water. His Shoshone mother had shown him long before treaties broke and borders closed. Hartwick sent men with rifles, even sent them back bleeding. A week later, Hartwick was found dead in a ravine, skull split, pockets empty. Even hadn't done it, but the truth had never been part of the proceedings. The hangman, a broad-shouldered man named Pritchard, adjusted the noose with practiced indifference. The crowd murmured a low, restless hum. Then the voice came again, steady this time. "I'll pay his debt." It wasn't loud, wasn't sharp, but it sliced through the noise all the same. Heads turned. Clara Boone stood at the edge of the square, flour still dusting her sturdy hands. Coins clinked faintly in a small leather pouch clutched in one trembling fist, a creased envelope in the other. She wasn't small, not really, but she carried herself as though she wished she were, shoulders drawn inward, chin slightly lowered, the posture of someone used to taking up as little space as possible. Chestnut hair was pinned into a simple knot, her dress plain, elbows patched. Judge Bren's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Speak clearly, Miss Boone," Clara swallowed, and stepped forward. The crowd parted, not out of respect, but confusion. Women didn't interrupt executions. Women like Clara hardly interrupted anything. "I'll pay his debt," she repeated louder now, her voice shaking but unbroken. "The law allows a condemned man's life to be redeemed if restitution is paid to the victim's family and bond posted for future conduct. I have the money." Laughter rippled from the back, spreading like a fever. "Sweetheart thinks she can buy herself a man," someone called. "Maybe she's lonely," another voice added, drawing more snickers. Clara's cheeks flushed, but she did not lower her gaze. She walked straight to the platform, boots kicking up dust, and held out the pouch. $300, the territorial limit. "I've read the statute. I have the right." Bren's lips pressed into something not quite a smile. "That provision exists for family or business partners, not strangers." "It doesn't say that," Clara replied, hands trembling, though her tone held firm. "It says any party willing to assume legal responsibility." Pritchard glanced at the judge. Bren tapped his fingers once against his coat, then truly looked at her, something cold and calculating settling behind his eyes. "You understand what you're proposing, Miss Boone? You will bear full financial and legal responsibility for this man. Any crime he commits, any debt he accrues becomes yours. If he flees, you forfeit the bond and face charges yourself." "I understand." "And you believe a man like Even Crow, a half-breed drifter without home, family or loyalty to law or decency, deserves such mercy." The word mercy sounded rotten in his mouth. Clara's jaw set. I believe every person deserves a fair trial. He didn't get one. Silence fell across the square. Bren's eyes glinted. After a long pause, he turned to the crowd, spreading his hands as though inviting their judgment. The law is the law, he said smoothly, and Miss Boone is correct. Territorial statute permits substitution of bond in capital cases with consent of the victim's kin and full payment rendered. He looked back at Clara. Samuel Hartwig's widow has left the territory. His brother remains. If he accepts and if you can post the bond now, I will commute the sentence to indentured service. Clara did not hesitate. She climbed the steps, ignoring the muttering, and poured the contents of the pouch into the judge's waiting palm. Gold eagles. Silver dollars, worn notes folded tight. Bren counted slowly for show. 300 exactly, he announced, signaling the clerk. Draw up the papers! Only then did he even look at her. Clara met his gaze for a heartbeat before her eyes flicked away. He looked more like an outlaw sketch than a living man. Hair grown wild, beard untrimmed, eyes shadowed. Yet in that brief moment she saw something she hadn't expected. Confusion. The clerk returned with parchment and pen. Bren read aloud, voice pitched to Carrie. By authority of the territorial court, the death sentence of Even Crow is hereby commuted to 5 years of indentured service under the legal guardianship and financial responsibility of Miss Clara Boone. He will reside on her property, labor under her direction, and remain subject to her authority in all matters of law and conduct. Failure to comply will result in immediate rearrest and reinstatement of the original sentence. Miss Boone, do you accept these terms? I do. Sign here. Her hand shook so badly the ink blotted, but she pressed on, writing her name in careful slanting script. Bren turned to Even. And you, Crow, accept indenture in place of the noose. Even's voice came rough as gravel on iron. Doesn't seem like I've got much choice. No, Bren replied pleasantly. You don't. He nodded to Pritchard. The hangman loosened the rope and hauled Even to his feet, cutting the bonds at his wrists only to replace them with iron shackles. The chain clanked as he locked them. Indenture isn't freedom, Bren said, handing Clara a small iron key. It's ownership. He's yours, Miss Boone, and so is the burden. If he breaks the rules, harms anyone, or so much as leaves town without written permission, the blame falls on you, and the rope will wait for you both. Clara swallowed hard. I understand. Bren leaned close, voice dropping so only she could hear. I wonder what your father would say. Her face drained, but she took the key. The crowd began to disperse, already twisting the story into something ugly. Pritchard shoved Even forward. He stumbled off the platform, chains rattling, and Clara followed, gripping the key until it bit into her palm. They crossed the square in silence, Clara ahead, Even behind, the space between them thick with stares and whispers. Bought herself a killer. Bet she's got plans. Traded a noose for a leash. Clara kept her eyes forward step after step, until they reached the Boone General Store at the corner of Main and Ash, the only place she had ever truly known. Inside the store, the late light settled into the wood grain and dust like a held breath. Clara stood behind the counter, the small iron key warm in her palm, while Even remained near the door, as if unsure whether he was guest, prisoner, or something in between. For a long moment neither spoke. Outside, boots passed, voices drifted, the town already stitching rumors into truth. Finally, Clara set the key on the counter between them. You're not in chains anymore, she said quietly. But you're not free either.
Not yet.
Even studied the key, then her face, searching for something he couldn't quite name. Why risk everything for a stranger? He asked. Clara let out a slow breath, the tension of weeks leaving her shoulders at last. Because someone should have, she said, and because I'm tired of fear deciding who gets to live. Silence settled, softer this time. Even picked up the key, weighed it once, then set it back down. Then I'll earn the life you bought, he said. Outside, the sun dipped behind the mountains, and for the first time since the rope touched his neck, the future felt like something more than borrowed time.